This is what it's going to take for the Bruins to compete with the Ducks in the Rose Bowl.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast, everything. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Where we get started today is the fact that UCLA, they're in a big matchup where they are not favored. It's another 3-score, maybe 4-score spread, depending on what happens when the game time starts. That UCLA, they're huge underdogs against Oregon. But again, I'm preaching small victories here. Small victories, maybe some Big Ten after dark, ode to the Pac-12 after dark, right? We saw that game maybe last week, Washington State, San Jose State. They got some Pac-12 after dark nonsense. Maybe UCLA can bring that Pac-12 weirdness after dark and turn that into Big Ten after dark against an Oregon team that is unbeaten, coming off a bye, fresh off their best performance of the season, but that's against their bitter rival, Oregon State, turned non-conference bitter rival, where they've been talking about how bad Oregon had played the first 2 weeks against Idaho Boise State, that they came out and laid the smackdown. So what Oregon team is UCLA going to get? At this point, it doesn't really matter because the Bruins can execute in certain facets of the game. They will be competitive. It's just the fact that, can they do so? All right, let's start offensively, right? For UCLA to do things in this game, to succeed, to truly succeed in this game, UCLA cannot, and I stress cannot turn the ball over. Cannot. The Bruins have played 3 games through 4 weeks in the college football season. Every single game, UCLA has turned the ball over 2 times. Not once, at least twice. Garbers had a couple of picks week 1. You had in week 2, you dropped the ball, you threw a pick. Then in week 4, you had the strip sack fumble, a fumble that was recovered by UCLA. And then eventually for the Bruins, two turnovers against LSU, right? So they threw a late pick and Garbers fumbled. A lot of that has been Garbers as the main culprit. Maybe I'm not really sure what you consider the Indiana failure there, but a lot of that has to do with Garbers. So one, can Garbers play a clean football game, right? A lot of that will have to do with how the Bruins are successful up front. Oregon is very confident on the D-line. They're the one team, a lot of these teams, these pundits in the Big Ten have expected to be a challenger to Ohio State atop the Big Ten. And maybe when they play later, it will be an Oregon win. And who knows? I'm not really sure. You got 18 teams. Who knows who will be in that Big Ten championship game? They're supposed to contend for a Big Ten crown and had the physicality up front to boot under Dan Lanning with the recruiting, with the quarterback under Dillon Gabriel, that they can score enough, do enough defensively, and they're just going to beat opponents. That's kind of been the Oregon way since, ironically, Chip Kelly's been there, all right, way back when. And now, through different coaches, they kind of got back to that physical up front, and that's what the Bruins need to do. So what can UCLA to counteract that? Just don't gift them turnovers, right? Garbers, when he took over for Dante last year, the big thing was he'd make the right read. He wouldn't turn it over. And no, he wasn't spectacular, but the numbers were much better than they are now, which tells you the difference between the Chip Kelly offense and the Eric Bieniemy offense, how much these players have struggled to grasp and understand what the right reads are and maybe what is open. Part of that is, can Garbers understand it, or players running the right routes? Is everybody up front, to the skill players, to the quarterback, truly having top tier understanding of this offense? And you look at Garbers' play right now, it's not, right? It's not the simple passing scheme that it was when you're playing with what Chip Kelly likes to do, run the ball more than 50% of the time. And when the Bruins do that, they generally win because they're almost always successful. And then you can use your passing plays off that. It's a little different. They're asking a lot more of Garbers. I'm not sure how much he gets to change up front. I'm not sure how much leeway he's given. I know there's the new communication system directly to the quarterback with 15 seconds. There's no weird, goofy things on the sideline. It's direct communication until there's 15 seconds on the clock. But it all starts with Ethan Garbers playing a clean football game. And maybe it's someone else who has the fumble bug, right? UCLA can't turn it over. And they've been turning it over quite a bit. And that's what bad football teams do. They turn the ball over and over and over again. And I'm not sure Garbers is a turnover machine. I don't think there are quarterbacks who will throw a lot, and they'll throw a lot of interceptions, right? Young quarterbacks in the NFL, guys who like to sling it in college football, right? 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 2 and 3, run for 380, all these crazy gaudy numbers. I'm not sure that's Garbers' way. I'm not sure that's, as a redshirt senior, him necessarily. That just tells you about the offense. But part of the problem, too, is the protection up front. So can UCLA, who has sacked 5 times against LSU, can they keep that number of sacks to 3 or less? It's not spectacular, but 3 or less would be much better. All right. Now, if it's 3 and then the Ducks have the jersey of Garbers in their hands 5 times, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about only 3 sacks, 2 QB pressures beyond that. And then maybe you think about Garbers, who drops back to throw closer to 40 times. If he's only getting pressured extremely terrible, if he's getting pressured terribly in the backfield, right? If it's a big time pass rush from the Oregon Ducks, and it's only happening 20% of the time, as opposed to what it seems like closer to 50, that's what it feels like. I don't have numbers in front of me, but that's just how it feels. You watch him go back to throw, you're like, is the pocket going to crumble? Does he have time to throw? Which leads to poor decisions or him trying to do too much, because the Bruins have been down in every game after the opening drive. We'll touch on that in a moment. So don't turn it over. Can the Bruins alleviate the pressure, right? You think of sinus pressure. You think of a head cold. That's what UCLA has in the quarterback position right now. Ethan Garbers, he's got a lot of pressure up here. He's got a lot of pressure because the pocket is collapsing on him every single time. And that's not even to talk about the running game that's averaging 60 yards per game. The Bruins just flat out are dominating line of scrimmage. And this new scheme is one that is not tailored toward their strength, pass protection, or a running game that, with similar tailbacks to last year, and Berger, who seems to be a successful runner now that he's available and ready after being a late transfer portal ad for Deshaun Foster and company this year, can the Bruins parlay their limited success against LSU into much better rushing numbers? You take away Garbers losing 30 yards in a play, getting sacked over and over. UCLA had, I thought, generally a lot more positive running plays against LSU than they had in the first 2 weeks, like consistent 5-yard chunks more often than they had against the Hoosiers, than they had against the Rainbow Warriors. Can they build on that? So maybe to take the pressure off of Garbers, can they get closer to a 100-yard rushing game? They had 96 against Indiana. Crack it, right? So your 3 things offensively: UCLA, 100 yards rushing. That's not a lot. Break it. 3 sacks, QB pressures, 5 or less. If there's more than that, UCLA is going to lose this game by a lot, because it will be ugly if they can't continue to keep Garbers upright. And then if he does have to make a spectacular play, right? Garbers can scramble. He can move in the pockets. That's maybe not what his forte is, but he is athletic enough to do so. Can he keep the turnover number to 0? And at least 1, because UCLA has not had a game where they've only turned the ball over once, let alone 0 times. Imagine this UCLA team if they could just pin the opposition on the 10 every time, just like they did with Brody Richter last week. Just boom, beautiful punts in Tiger Stadium, dropping it on a freaking pin again and again. So those are your keys offensively. Defensively, it'll be unique. What does it mean? We'll talk about all that next on Locked on UCLA. Let's talk to you about Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For specific product disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Cruising on to the second segment of Locked On UCLA. Where can UCLA make Dillon Gabriel, one-time perceived UCLA quarterback, that's long gone out the window? We maybe hoped he could have come to UCLA after he transferred a second time, right? Out of UCF. Thought he was coming to UCLA. DTR stays. Could have had a 2-3 year at UCLA. Instead goes to Oklahoma a couple of years, right? Ends up being a Sooner, ditches them, ends his career as an Oregon Duck. Okay, West Coast, best coast, whatever. Here we go. This is a Dillon Gabriel, right, who has a high completion percentage, right? He is completing a high percentage of his passes, although it's not big plays down the field. Similar to what Bo Nix did. He was athletic. He could complete some passes. But if UCLA allows him to go complete 75, 80% of his passes, 90% of his passes, right? He started the season off against Idaho 41-49 with 380 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. All right? So that was a game. Oregon at home as the then perceived number 3 team in the country, where they barely beat Idaho. Now, Idaho is one of the best teams in the FCS, right? They are a team that can challenge for a national championship at the FCS level. And they can certainly go beat an FBS team because they went and beat Wyoming on the road the very next week. Pretty sure they beat them down. Now, Idaho, in this game, if I've done my numbers correctly, barely cracked 200 yards of offense. They turned the ball over 2 times. They fumbled it twice, recovered it, or fumbled it. Their quarterback, Jack Lane, fumbled it twice. They had 2 different passers throw an interception on the road at Autzen, and this was a 1-score game against the Oregon Ducks late. Now, that was week 1. UCLA had their struggles week 1. But then Oregon went, and they probably, I think, should have lost against Boise State if it wasn't for a kickoff return touchdown, a late drive to the end, for Oregon's first ever win against Boise State. That's a big statement in its own right. What were the things that Idaho did, right? Boise State, they've got one of the best running backs in the country. So I'm not really going to focus on what Boise State could do right. At least, right? They could run the ball. They could do things. Idaho, with limited offense, practically no QBR for a quarterback that threw less than 50% completion, 168 yards, 6.5 yards per throw, an interception, fumbled it twice. This is what Idaho was able to do. And I think if Oregon is sloppy like this on offense, then maybe the Bruins can do something about it. Idaho had 3 sacks and a total of 6 tackles for loss. 3 passes defended, which is unique considering Dillon Gabriel completed nearly 80% of his passes, right? I forget what the exact number is, but 41 for 49 is something. Now, that was a game when Oregon ran into themselves going 4 and 4 down a couple of times. I'm not sure Dan Lanning's going to do similar things. He's not going to do crazy, dumb decisions. Although we saw Brian Kelly do that against LSU. If the Ducks get greedy, hopefully there's a loud, rowdy student section with the first game for UCLA with students. And now they get the majority of their games with students around town in Southern California. Can the Bruins be successful and get the job done defensively? The Ducks have struggled at times protecting their quarterback and bringing pressure in and seeing Gabriel not look the best. That doesn't mean he hasn't succeeded. That doesn't mean he won't carve up the defense. He could be like Nussmeier, who waited just a moment, found the little outlet up front, find his tight end, find his, check down, and they could get first downs all day. And this is a UCLA defense. Kanye Clark out for the year. They were without Cajo last week. Keanu Williams out for the year. They're depleted in the D-line. And we're still waiting for reinforcements, still waiting to see who can step up and how Akaka Malloy can devise a game plan that can create pressure and wreak havoc in the backfield like a physical Idaho front did in week 1. How Boise State took it to them week 2. Well, until Bieniemy can find a running back or channel, Genty's output of Boise State from, Harden, from Berger, Keegan Jones, whatever, it's going to be up to the defense to get in the backfield. In this game, Dillon Gabriel did fumble, right? It's not like he's the next great Heisman winner at this moment. This is somebody who I think can be coaxed into throwing an interception. The big problem for UCLA was Nussmeier threw a great ball. He was never under a lot of duress, and when he did, throws a dime for a touchdown, finds the check down, just throws it away. He was really good in the second half when he led the Tigers for 2 90-plus yard touchdown drives. What UCLA needs to do in this game, very important, right out of the gates, you have to stop Oregon. They have to. The first drive cannot end in any points. If UCLA has any chance to cover, to win this game, to look competitive to the fourth quarter, which I think a lot of UCLA fans would get very, very excited about, all right, very excited about, to have this game competitive. We all would be very excited. You can't, for the fourth straight game, be down a touchdown. You can't let them go down the field and score. LSU did it. Hawaii did it. Indiana did it. All very different ways. Hawaii did it because they converted on fourth down because UCLA forgot how to cover a punt. Indiana did it because UCLA couldn't generate a pass rush. 3 third downs later, they score a touchdown. 1 offensive play later, the Bruins fumble. They're down 2 scores. LSU goes down, and then for the first time all year, the UCLA offense responds. But if UCLA gets the ball first, they got to do something. They got to score points. They can't just put up a goose egg. But the defense, for the 4th consecutive week, you cannot give up a score on the opening drive. Now, I will compromise, and if the Bruins hold the Ducks to 3, I will consider that a victory. But I'm not sure if I have the numbers. I'm not sure if there's a stat out there. But on opening drives through the first 5 weeks of the college football season, UCLA has to have the most points scored against because they are a perfect 3 for 3, giving up 21 points in their opening 3 games. So you cannot give up a score in the opening drive. All right, maybe they score a bunch. I will consider this. I'll give the defense maybe a full letter grade better. Barring the rest of the game, of course, on a Monday reaction, a Saturday night reaction, based upon if they don't give up an opening drive for a touchdown. Expectations, if they give up 3, cool. If they don't give up a touchdown, that will be huge. In the confidence for UCLA, when they're not trailing in the first quarter, less than 3 minutes in, half quarter in, time goes by a lot quicker in these college football games when the time doesn't stop after first downs. The longer you're competitive, the tighter it gets. That favors the underdog at home. Big Ten after dark weirdness. Don't give up a touchdown in the opening drive. 2, UCLA must win the turnover battle. It's complimentary football, so it's up to Garbers and the offense not to do anything dumb. But the defense, you have to take the ball away. Have to. Even if you give up an opening score for a touchdown, which I just spent like a whole rant on, you have to take the ball away. And I think the Bruins can do that, whether it's getting once in the backfield, strip sack of Gabriel, forcing an interception, forcing him into a rare, poor decision for a long-time college quarterback. UCLA, I think, is capable of doing that this Saturday night. It's weird. It's late. I think it's possible. And then 3, all of those things, those first 2 things can happen if UCLA can play like they did against Hawaii, dial up blitzes at the right time, get the right linebackers, if the secondary can hold up just a little bit, if UCLA can sack Gabriel once, right? UCLA has not had a single sack since week 1. Week 1, and that's 2 full games against Power 4 teams. You need a sack. UCLA needs at least a couple QB hurries, and I want 2 sacks. So between QB hurries, between sacks, I want that number to be 4. That's a low number. That's not a high bar. But the Bruins have not proven to do that consistently. They've not been able to do so. And if maybe everybody who's transferred in is able to play, if they're a bit healthier, if Tawia looks a little stronger after being a bit banged up prior to the LSU game, all those things can help. A well-timed linebacker blitz or corner blitz could help this all out too. It has to add up to 4. And if they can get some pressure in the backfield, QB hurries, sacks, between those add up to 4, then UCLA is very much going to be competitive much further into this game than we all expect and will cover. But what do I think will actually happen? Let's talk about it next on Locked on UCLA. All right, we're going to talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Let's get in on this action, right? UCLA, Oregon, it's a huge spread. This is an even bigger spread than the UCLA LSU game ended at. And that game finished closer to 21 points, 21.5. UCLA is plus 25.5 on FanDuel playing this game against Oregon. All right, this is nuts. This is a huge spread for a team at home, late night West Coast game at 8 p.m. Can they cover? Well, you're going to go FanDuel and check it out because that's a huge, huge spread. All right. So what you're going to do is you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So all you got to do is go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook, to check it out. That's a $5 bet to earn $200 in bonus bets by only placing a $5 bet. Check out UCLA, Oregon. Check out those other games on FanDuel.com. All right, here we go. It's prediction time. Is this going to be pretty? I just talked about, what UCLA is dealing with, right? They have many shows. They've been on many different platforms, whether it's a UCLA, Oregon, talking UCLA, Penn State, UCLA, LSU, many platforms. The struggle for the Bruins has been in the trenches, all right? And I do think UCLA will surprise us a couple of times with an improved presence on both the offensive line and defensive line in this game versus Oregon. I really do. I just don't believe, personally, at this stage, they're going to do that for 4 quarters against Oregon because they haven't proven they can do that for 4 quarters against anybody yet. Hawaii, LSU, Indiana, obviously not in that order. Oregon is the team that's looked the roughest out of this 3-game gauntlet. It seems like Indiana, LSU, Oregon, soon to be Penn State in a week's time. What UCLA needs is an improved protection for Garbers. Do I think they'll get that? I think UCLA will do enough to neutralize the Ducks for a quarter and a half offensively. I do think, this is my hot take, the defense does get that stop on the opening drive. I think for week 5, game 4 for UCLA football, first time all season, they do not give up a touchdown. They don't give up a touchdown on the opening drive to Oregon. It's not saying a lot, but for UCLA not to be trailing, that'd be nice. Here, I want to go a step further, actually. I think this game, after each team's opening possession, UCLA 7, Oregon 3. It could be like that LSU game where the Bruins might actually lead second half, get some eyeballs looking, all the East Coasters debating whether to keep their eyeballs open or go to sleep and be shocked in the next morning. I think we might have a shocking score at halftime. In the end, I think Oregon might do something similar to what LSU did a week ago and pull away. I think Gabriel will complete quite a few passes, and unfortunately, UCLA might lose this game by 3+ scores. Yet, if you're on FanDuel and you're wondering, will UCLA cover? I'm not sure if I have a full, complete score prediction. I've been going back and forth. I can't really decide. I'm thinking UCLA does cover. I'm thinking the Bruins can cover the plus 25.5 that you're getting on FanDuel. Is it a 25-point loss, right? If you're looking at different scores, is it like a 48-24? Is it a 45-21? All those scores, UCLA covers. All right? Other than like a 42-14, if UCLA, this might be one of those games, UCLA sits there, is competitive for a good few quarters. Oregon maybe lays it on them, and UCLA with the backdoor cover. You see the Bruins in bad beats with Scott Van Pelt, right? SVP. And UCLA covers. They look improved. Oregon, did their thing. because I do think Oregon, unfortunately, is going to win this game. It's been a while since the Bruins been able to knock off the Ducks. They haven't hosted Oregon since 2021 in the Rose Bowl. We've had College Game Day the last two times these two teams have played. 12:30 starts, midday Saturday primetime games in the college football slate post-COVID. And to be forgotten about, Big Ten game, 8 p.m. Pacific. It's weird. We're just hoping that Dan Lanning's team gets sloppy. I think they might be for a quarter coming off a bye. But if the Oregon Ducks come out and they score in the opening possession, I think it could get very ugly. Now, if UCLA shows up to the task offensively, because Oregon hasn't exactly been the most dominant team defensively, right? Yes, holding Idaho to 14 points is no thing to lay your hat on, but Oregon State really hurt themselves in that Week 3 game. They were moving the ball against Oregon before the Ducks pulled away. Boise State was scoring points on this Ducks team and probably should have won the game until a late punt. Oregon goes down and kicks a field goal to win it late. It's huge. So I'm not sure if the Oregon defense is going to frustrate Garbers as much as LSU did, as much as Indiana did. So I do think UCLA covers. I do think the Bruins are competitive early. And maybe they are fading again down the stretch, and I think that would be okay. But for things to go well, they have to hit those keys. They have to make sure that they don't let Garbers get completely ripped apart in the back, taking snaps. And they can't allow the Ducks to score right away. So my hard takes, UCLA doesn't give up a touchdown. They'll be leading after the first quarter. But I do think Oregon will win this game. We'll see afterwards. I'll be excited. I'll be cheering. I'll be super, super enthusiastic about this, depending on how it all plays out. But I do think the Bruins cover. And that might be a hard line that many people don't want to. That's a lot of points. That's a lot of points. I think the Bruins cover. And that's where we're going to end here in Locked On UCLA. And to cover this team again, we're going to have a Locked On UCLA reaction after the game. Whether it's early Sunday morning, maybe it's in between Saturday night to Sunday morning, we will post a reaction. We'll find a way to talk about it. We will be excited to talk UCLA football against the Oregon Ducks, for better or for worse. All right, so get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. Hit that download button, subscribe button. Thanks for your support. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.